Dinner felt like any other night, at least on the surface. I set the table, lit a candle just to make it cozy, and Jonas came in all smiles, acting like the perfect husband. He couldn't wait to tell me about his next big adventure, another so-called group trip with the guys. His eyes sparkled with excitement as if he was a teenager again, planning a getaway. But the way he leaned into the story felt rehearsed, like he'd practiced it in front of a mirror. He said they were planning a hiking trip in the mountains, a chance to relax and bond with his colleagues. His words rolled off his tongue so smoothly, but I felt something tugging at me, deep inside. My instincts weren't buying it. Maybe it was the way he hesitated before naming who was going, or maybe it was because I'd heard the same lines too many times before. Still, I played along, smiling as if I was thrilled for him. When I asked who exactly would be there, he mumbled, "More or less the same group." That phrase, "more or less," clung to me like a sticky note I couldn't peel off. He wouldn't look me straight in the eyes, and instead, he poured himself another glass of wine. I felt the air thicken, the kind of silence that tells you there's more to the story than what's being shared. My mind started filing away the details, ready for the moment I'd need to piece them together. I tried to lighten the mood, almost joking, but there was an edge in my voice I couldn't hide. "Strange," I said, tilting my head. "You always come back with these colorful stories, but not a single photo, not even a group selfie?" The words hung in the air like smoke after blowing out a candle. I wanted to see how he'd react without giving away how much I already doubted him. He laughed, that nervous little chuckle he uses when he's cornered. "You know me," he said, waving his hand as if it explained everything. "I hate taking pictures." But that didn't fit. I remembered how he'd once filled his phone with photos of a barbecue, snapping every silly moment. So why would he suddenly despise photos when it came to these trips? My stomach twisted. The logic just didn't add up. Inside, my doubts grew louder, but outside I smiled, playing the part of the supportive wife. I let the conversation move on, but I stored his words carefully in the back of my mind. My instincts were warning me. Something about these trips wasn't real. And deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before the cracks in his stories widened into something I couldn't ignore. As I cleared the plates, my mind wouldn't quiet down. His smile, his easy excuses, they felt like pieces of a puzzle that didn't fit. I remembered past trips, the way he'd return with rehearsed tales, but never with the tired glow of someone who'd hiked mountains or camped under stars. It was as if he carried only the performance of a story, not the reality of one. That night, as we sat on the couch, I studied him closely. The way he avoided my eyes, the way he quickly changed the subject whenever I circled back to details. It only fueled the storm building inside me. I laughed at his jokes, leaned into his shoulder, but every move I made was calculated. If he thought I was gullible, he was sorely mistaken. Still, I needed more than gut feelings. Instincts were powerful, yes, but evidence was unshakable. And as much as I wanted to press him harder, I knew timing was everything. I decided to wait, to listen, to collect every inconsistency like breadcrumbs leading me somewhere darker. My doubts had already taken root, and I was ready to see where they would lead me next. A few days later, I was folding laundry in the quiet of the afternoon, the hum of the dryer filling the room. That's when I caught it, a faint but unmistakable scent on one of Jonas's shirts. It wasn't detergent, it wasn't cologne, and it certainly wasn't mine. It was perfume, light and sweet, clinging stubbornly to the fabric like it belonged there. My hands froze mid-fold, and for a moment, the world tilted. I pressed the shirt closer, inhaling again, hoping I was wrong. But no, the scent was real, and it wasn't accidental. I could feel my chest tighten, my heartbeat rising like a drum echoing through my ears. Memories of his smiling face at dinner flashed back, and suddenly, every one of his so-called group trips replayed in my mind like a reel of lies. This wasn't paranoia anymore. It was proof, subtle but undeniable. That evening, I decided to test him, gently, carefully. Over dinner, I set down my fork and looked across the table with a calm I barely felt inside. "Your shirt smelled different this time," I said, my tone even. Almost like a woman's perfume. The way his face shifted, just for a split second, told me more than words ever could. Jonas didn't miss a beat. He leaned back in his chair, waving off my words with a forced laugh. "Oh, maybe from the hotel maid?" he said, his tone too casual, too quick. "You're overthinking again, Angelina." The way he tossed out that excuse, like it was nothing, only deepened the hollow in my chest. He wanted me to believe it was a fluke, a meaningless accident. I nodded slowly, keeping my expression neutral, but inside my mind was spinning. If he thought brushing me off would make me drop it, he didn't know me as well as he thought. I'd been down this road before, the gaslighting, the subtle ways he tried to make me doubt myself. But this time, I wasn't going to swallow the story whole. This time, I would hold on to that perfume like a piece of evidence in a trial. Then, almost too calmly, I added, "Right, just like how I'm overthinking the fact that none of your colleagues' wives ever mention these trips." My voice was smooth, but the sharpness was there, tucked beneath the surface. He froze for a moment, eyes flickering, before shaking his head and forcing another laugh. But that pause, that hesitation, was all the confirmation I needed. He brushed it off quickly, reaching for his glass of water like nothing had happened. But I saw the flicker in his eyes, the way his jaw tightened before he forced himself to relax. That tiny crack in his armor told me everything. There was something he didn't want me to see. And if he thought I'd let it go, he was underestimating me in the worst way. I smiled faintly, pushing my food around my plate, all the while building my plan. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't accuse. Not yet. That was exactly what he expected. Instead, I'd let him think he'd won this round, that his charm and dismissive tone had calmed me. But inside, I was sharper than ever, already preparing my next move. That night, lying in bed beside him, I stared at the ceiling while he snored peacefully. He slept like a man who believed his secrets were safe, but I knew better. My instincts were screaming, and my resolve had hardened. I needed proof, something undeniable, something he couldn't twist into another excuse. And soon enough, I would have it. The next morning, I sat with my coffee, scrolling through my phone, my mind already buzzing with questions. If Jonas's trips were real, there had to be some trace. Colleagues talking, pictures shared, something. But every search came up empty, and that only fueled my suspicion. Finally, I decided to be bold. I messaged one of his colleagues on social media, keeping my tone casual, as if I were just making small talk. "Hey," I typed. "Hope you're doing well. Just curious. Jonas said you all had a hiking trip last month. How was it?" My finger hovered over the send button for a moment before I hit it. My stomach tightened, my hands trembling slightly. It felt like crossing a line, but it was the only way to strip away the fog of his lies. I waited, each second stretching longer than the last. When the reply came, my blood ran cold. "Hiking trip? We haven't done one in years. Last month, I didn't go anywhere." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The words glared back at me, undeniable, irrefutable. Jonas hadn't just been hiding details. He had fabricated everything. Every trip, every story, every excuse. And suddenly, I realized just how deep his deception ran. I read the message again, hoping I'd misinterpreted it, but the truth was staring me in the face. There had been no trips, no colleagues bonding in the mountains. All those nights I'd kissed him goodbye, wishing him a safe journey. He had been with someone else. My stomach churned, and I gripped my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I felt betrayed, but also strangely calm, because now I had the first piece of undeniable proof. Still, I needed more. I couldn't confront him with only a message. He'd twist it, call it a misunderstanding, claim his colleague forgot. No, I wanted evidence that would leave him speechless. So I pulled up our bank's online statement, scrolling through line after line until something caught my eye. A luxury resort charge. Not once, but twice, each time on the exact weekends of his supposed group trips. My breath caught as I clicked into the details. Dinner receipts, spa services, a double occupancy suite. It wasn't the life of a man hiking mountains with friends. It was a romantic getaway carefully hidden behind a curtain of lies. Rage bubbled in me, hot and raw, but beneath it there was also clarity. I finally saw him for what he was, and I knew I couldn't let it slide. I closed the laptop and sat there in silence, the glow of the screen still burning in my eyes. For years, I had believed his half-smiles, his stories that painted him as the hard-working man who just needed a break with the guys. But now the curtain had dropped and the picture behind it was ugly. It wasn't about colleagues. It was about her, whoever she was, a woman I didn't know, yet who had taken up space in my marriage. I whispered to myself, almost in disbelief. So these were never about trips, only about her. My voice cracked, but the anger behind it gave me strength. Tears welled up, but I wiped them quickly. I wasn't going to break. Not for him. Not for the lie he had built around me. I wanted to scream, but instead I chose silence, the kind that sharpens focus and steels resolve. That night, as Jonas drifted off to sleep beside me, I lay awake, staring into the dark. Every detail, the perfume, the messages, the receipts, looped through my mind like a film reel I couldn't pause. I didn't feel powerless anymore. No, I felt determined. If he thought he was clever, he was about to learn just how sharp I could be when pushed. The time had come to prepare for a confrontation he would never see coming. When Jonas casually announced his next group trip, I felt my lips curve into a smile that wasn't really a smile at all. Inside, I was boiling, but on the outside, I played sweet and agreeable. "That sounds amazing," I told him, tilting my head as though I was impressed. "You know, I'd love to come along this time, meet your friends, finally see what all the fun is about." My voice was smooth, almost playful, but my heart hammered with anticipation. His reaction was everything I expected. Panic flickered across his face before he tried to mask it with a laugh. "Oh, it's just guys only. No wives allowed." He said it too quickly, like a child caught sneaking cookies before dinner. I leaned back in my chair, swirling the wine in my glass, and studied him like he was a stranger sitting in my kitchen. Every move he made only confirmed what I already knew. The silence stretched, and I let it, savoring his discomfort. I didn't rush to rescue him from it, not this time. Instead, I locked eyes with him and let my smile turn colder, sharper. The air between us was thick, heavy with secrets I was about to drag into the light. He had spun his last story, and I was ready to unravel every thread. I set my glass down carefully, the sound of it touching the table louder than I expected. "Funny," I said, my voice steady, "because I spoke to John. He told me there haven't been any trips at all." The words hung in the air, and for once Jonas didn't have a ready smile or a quick excuse. His face paled, his mouth opened and closed like he was scrambling for air. Watching him squirm felt like the first breath of freedom I'd taken in months. Before he could answer, I reached into my bag and pulled out the papers I had printed earlier. His eyes darted to them, wide and nervous. With deliberate calm, I spread the credit card statement across the table, each line highlighted, each charge impossible to deny. "Luxury resorts, dinners for two, spa services," I listed slowly, savoring the way his jaw tightened with every word. "This isn't bonding with colleagues, Jonas. This is betrayal, plain and simple." That's when his mask finally cracked. Anger flared in his eyes, sharp and defensive. "You had no right to snoop around," he snapped, his voice rising. It was almost laughable, him trying to twist the blame back onto me. But I wasn't shaken. If anything, his fury only solidified my strength. I leaned forward, my tone low but firm. "And you had no right to build your lies on our marriage." The tension in the room was electric, like a storm about to break. Jonas pushed back from the table, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He was pacing now, running his hands through his hair, muttering curses under his breath. But all I did was watch, calm and collected, because for once, the power wasn't his. He was unraveling right in front of me, and I didn't need to raise my voice to make him feel it. He turned to me, eyes blazing. "You're making a huge mistake, Angelina. You don't understand." I cut him off with a single raised hand. "No, Jonas. I understand perfectly. You weren't going on trips. You were going on vacations with her, and while you thought you were clever enough to keep me in the dark, you forgot one thing. Lies always leave a trail. My words sliced through the room, each one landing like a verdict he couldn't escape. For a moment, silence swallowed us. He stood there, fists clenched, lips pressed tight, but he had nothing left to say. I picked up the statements, slid them back into my bag, and stood tall. "This ends now," I told him, my voice strong, final. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply left the words hanging between us like a closing door, knowing the next step would be mine, and mine alone. I wasn't going to slip quietly out of his life, not after everything he had done. If Jonas thought he could betray me in the shadows, I would drag his lies into the light. So, I gathered every piece of proof, the statements, the messages, the receipts, and kept them ready. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about exposing him for who he really was. For too long, his family had praised him as the loyal husband, the perfect man. They deserved to see the truth. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. A family gathering, the kind where everyone laughed, clinked glasses, and spoke about Jonas with glowing admiration. My heart pounded as I watched him work the room, smiling and shaking hands as if he had nothing to hide, but I held steady, waiting for the right moment. I wanted every eye on him when his mask finally shattered. When the conversation turned to his next trip, I seized it. I stood, my hands steady even as my chest burned with adrenaline. "Here's what Jonas calls his group trips," I said, pulling out the papers. Gasps rippled through the room as I laid the truth bare. Resorts, dinners, lies. Every detail that stripped him of the image he had worked so hard to build. His face drained of color, and for the first time, he looked small. The room fell silent, forks frozen in midair, wine glasses hovering just shy of lips. All eyes turned to Jonas, and I could almost hear the weight of their judgment pressing down on him. His mother covered her mouth with a trembling hand, his brother's brow furrowed in disbelief, and the cousins whispered like a current running through the table. Jonas shifted uncomfortably, his voice barely above a whisper. "Angelina, stop this." I turned to him slowly, letting the tension stretch until the silence screamed louder than words. "No, Jonas," I said, my tone calm but unyielding. "You stopped this when you chose her over me. You lied to all of us, and they deserve to know the man behind the stories." My voice didn't shake, not once. It rang clear, like a bell cutting through the fog, impossible to ignore. Jonas reached for me then, his fingers twitching like he wanted to snatch the papers away, but he didn't dare. He knew there was no escaping what I'd just unleashed. I watched him crumble under the stares of his family, his shoulders slumping as if the air had been pulled out of him. And for the first time in a long time, I felt powerful, not vindictive, but free. He sat back down slowly, his eyes darting from one family member to the next, searching for an ally he would never find. Whispers grew louder, questions flew across the table, and his once proud image crumbled right before their eyes. I didn't need to shout or cry. The evidence spoke louder than anything I could ever say. The man they thought they knew was gone, replaced by the liar I had unmasked. Jonas's hands shook as he tried to form words, but nothing came. He stammered. "It's not what it looks like." The excuse fell flat, a fragile attempt to rewrite reality when the proof was sitting in front of everyone. I stood tall, collecting the papers, my heart steady. This wasn't about revenge for its own sake. It was about reclaiming the truth he had stolen from me with every lie. As I left the table, I felt every eye follow me, but I didn't flinch. I had done what I came to do. I had pulled the mask from his face in the one place he thought he was untouchable. He was left with nothing but shame, and I walked away with my head high, knowing that his lies would never again hold me hostage. My revenge was complete, but my story was only beginning. Months later, I barely recognized the woman I had become. The shadows of doubt and betrayal that once weighed me down had lifted, replaced by a lightness I hadn't felt in years. I was free. Free of his lies, free of the endless waiting for trips that never existed, free of the constant second-guessing. Instead of mourning what I'd lost, I poured myself into what I'd always dreamed of, opening my own travel agency. There was something poetic about it, really. While Jonas had fed me stories of imaginary adventures, I now built real ones, trips that brought joy, laughter, and connection to people who truly wanted them. My little agency became more than a business. It became my declaration of independence, proof that I didn't need him or his fabricated world to feel alive. I had reclaimed my own story. I woke each day with a sense of purpose, the smell of coffee filling my kitchen as I planned itineraries for clients who trusted me. No secrets, no lies, just honesty and excitement. And every time I stamped a brochure or clicked confirm on a booking, I felt like I was stitching myself back together, piece by piece. Jonas had taken years from me, but he couldn't take my future. One afternoon, while running errands, I pushed my cart down the supermarket aisle, and there he was, Jonas. I almost didn't recognize him at first. His shoulders slumped, his eyes tired, his clothes wrinkled as though life had pressed down hard on him. For a moment our eyes met, and I saw the flicker of something I hadn't seen before. Regret. Pure, unfiltered regret. He approached slowly, almost cautiously, like a man stepping into unfamiliar territory. "Angelina," he said, his voice low and heavy. "I made a mistake. I miss us." Hearing those words felt strange, like listening to an echo from a past life. Once, they would have broken me, maybe even pulled me back into his orbit. But now, they sounded hollow, too little and far too late. I took a deep breath, feeling a calm strength settle over me. There was no anger, no bitterness, just clarity. I looked him in the eye and spoke the truth he could never erase. "The only mistake was me believing your stories. I don't need your fake trips anymore. I'm on a real journey now." The words left my lips like a closing chapter, final and unshakable. I left him standing there in the aisle, surrounded by shelves of canned goods and fluorescent lights that made him look even smaller. My cart rolled forward, steady and sure, while behind me he remained frozen in the ruins of his own choices. For once, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. His chapter in my life was closed, and the ending belonged entirely to me. As I stepped outside, the sun hit my face, warm and reassuring. I felt lighter, as though I had shed not just him, but the weight of years filled with suspicion and lies. The air smelled fresher, the sky seemed wider, and I realized I was no longer defined by what he had done to me. I was defined by what I had chosen to do for myself. Freedom wasn't just leaving him. It was stepping boldly into a life I had built with my own two hands. A life filled with truth, with courage, with real journeys that I controlled. And as I drove away, I smiled to myself, certain of one thing. Jonas could keep his regrets. I had already claimed my revenge, and I was finally living the life I deserved.